subhanahu wa ta'ala is in charge of everything, and He's the one that causes us to be what we are. But, by the way, maybe we should talk about that a little bit, especially for the youth, the youngsters that are sitting with us today, because maybe they could get the wrong idea. Sometimes, even adults, we have the idea that, why is Allah giving me this problem? Why is this going on like this? And this could really lead to a bad place. Because as a Muslim, we're supposed to understand and know that Allah is in charge of everything. That's right. And actually, His command is absolute. And that's also right. And there's nothing that's going to happen that He doesn't already know about. That's also right. But then we can come away with the idea that I've got a problem, a big problem right now, a huge problem. Oh, it's so big, man. Why isn't Allah helping me? And what happens is the shaitan starts waswas. He starts talking into your head about, oh, wow, yeah, you poor baby, you know. Look, you got all these problems. Nobody cares. Then he'll start working on the idea that, oh, if there is a God, wait a minute, what do you mean if? What is that? Where's that coming from? Well, you know who's prompting you with that? Iblis himself. He knows, the devil knows for sure there is Allah. There's no doubt in his mind at all. And he has no power. He really has no power. He just has this whisper, 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 whisper. And sometimes it feels like shouting, you know, in your head. Then he works around a sneaky way. Well, if there's a God, what is that? Then why does He allow bad things to happen to good believers? That's a good question, kind of. Because what happens is that he has now reached the level that he thinks he can influence you. He really thinks that he can take over. Because in a lot of cases, he does take over some people. But alhamdulillah, we have something that a lot of people don't have. We have the hidayah, or guidance, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, I'm going to break off here, and I'm going to come back to the subject, inshallah. But I wanted to talk about some of the things that apply to this kind of thinking. One of the things is what it says in the Quran, La ilaha illallah. What does that actually mean? The translations can vary. It can vary in translation. But if you know the Arabiya, you get it right away. Oh. But there are some things, even for the Arabs in the Quran, that they're going to be mixed up about. Did you know that? Even scholars could be messed up on some of the things in the Quran. Why? Because the Quran says that. Right in the very beginning of Surah Al-Imran, talking about something mutashabihat. What is that? What does that mean? Verses are clear, very clear. This is translation of the verse here. Some verses clear as a bell, but there are some things that only Allah knows what He said. But even that, why? Why would that be? Okay. Most of us, I think, already know, but we should share this with the youth. This life, as long as you can breathe that, as long as you can take a breath in and let it out, let's do that. Yeah, that feels good. As long as you can do that, you're still under what? The test. This test doesn't end until your life ends. Now, is there anybody that's going to live forever? How many think that somebody could live forever? Huh? Maybe. I like that. Actually, I didn't think about that. He said Allah lives forever. That's in the Quran. Al-Hayyu Qayyum. Wow. MashaAllah. How old are you? 10 years old? I'm older than that. Alhamdulillah. But I didn't think about that. So Allah lives forever. I like that. But is there any created by Allah that will live forever? What about Iblis? He's still alive. He won't live forever? I think you're right. Yeah? Actually, in the Quran, Iblis asked Allah to let him live forever. He didn't ask Allah to forgive him. I mean, you know, how could some people be so smart and be so dumb at the same time? He made a mistake. You know what the mistake was? What did the Iblis do that was bad? He was very arrogant. Okay, go ahead. He refused to do the sajda. Yeah, to Adam alayhi salam. You want to give the talk? This guy right here, he knows a lot of stuff, man. That's very good. Very good, mashallah. The beautiful part about this story is that we can learn that all of us have what's called kibr. Is that right? Kibr? Arrogance? Yeah. All of us have that built in. But we have other good things built in to counteract that. But that is a real bad thing. The only thing that Shaitan did, the devil, Iblis, the only thing that well, actually it wasn't, he did it. He didn't do it. What's your name? Come on, woman. Come on. Come on. Alaikum, say. MashaAllah. So, where do you go to school?
Multi-King School.
MashaAllah. Maybe you can come over on this side and so come on over here. No. Stand up. Yeah, all right. So, I want to ask you a question. How do you know all of this? Do you learn it at home, or do you learn it at school, or where do you learn it?
My mother and father teach me.
Oh, mashallah.
He's a hafiz too, Hafiz.
Do you know what the word hafiz means?
It means leader.
Nah, actually, that's a good guess, but it's wrong. You know what does hafiz mean? Anybody know? What does it mean? Actually, the word itself doesn't mean that. It means to protect something, to preserve it. So you're preserving the Quran, that the Hafiz, because Allah is the Hafiz for everything in the creation. He is the only protector that we turn to. But yeah, you're protecting the Quran by memorizing it. Did you memorize the entire Quran?
Yes.
Yes? So that helps you to know the answers to the questions, doesn't it?
Yes.
All right. Well, I'm going to ask you one more thing before I let you go. What is this life really all about?
Worshipping Allah and this life with the death.
Whoa! Definitely, here you go. That is the subject that I was going to bring up, but he already nailed it. This life is all about worshiping Allah, and it is only a test. Allah said in the Quran, in Surah Al-Dariyat, what about this? The purpose of life. It's at the very end of Surah Al-Dariyat. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ
الجن والإنس إلا ليعبدون.
Allahu Akbar. What does it mean? You know?
No.
That's okay. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us the purpose of our life. And He says it in the negative form. I like the way Allah does that. He starts out saying, no. Like, no way. Some of the verses, Kalla, Bal, whoa, that's double no. No way, Ray. But He's saying here that He did not, so it's a negative. He did not create the jinn and mankind, illa, which means what? Except. Yeah. La ilaha illallah. Means except. He did not create us except for ibadah. What is ibadah?
Worshipping Allah.
Worship. Ibadah is worship. If I say ibadah Allah, that means worship Allah. But everybody, according to this verse, is created to worship something. But it doesn't say Allah in the verse. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا, I didn't create the jinn and human beings except to worship. Obviously, we should worship Him. But now let's go back to the other verse that I mentioned earlier. La ikraha 15. What does that mean?
No.
Ikraha. It means no forcing. It means no forcing. Ikraha, no compulsion or forcing anybody in the what? The deen of Allah. What does deen mean?
It means a way of life.
Perfect. Perfect. Many people will say it means religion. Deen, they say religion. But that's not right. You know why? What happens if you're talking to a mulhid, somebody who is doesn't believe in anything? Mulhideen. What about that? Because he can say, after you say, Lakum dinakum waliya deen. To you, your deen, and to me, my deen, that's it. Go on your way. Right? But then he says, I don't have a religion, so your Quran must be wrong. Na'udhu billah. Whoa! But it doesn't say that. This is translations. By the way, first translation of the Quran, we just found out this year, was not by George Thale, not by Muhammad Yusuf Ali. It was by the Catholic Church. When English language is still new, like within the first 150 years after it started in the year 1200 something, that's when they translated it. And obviously, if you didn't realize it, they weren't trying to convert to Islam. So that's why they came up with stuff like read. Oh, you know what Iqra means? Most people think that. But the response from the Prophet ﷺ gives it away. He said, Ma ana bil qari. What is the qari? A qari, like in Ramadan, somebody that's standing up and facing the Qibla, and we're praying behind them, and he is a qari. What does that mean? Well, yeah, he's an imam for us, but qari means what? Because also there are three words: qari, Iqra, and Quran, all from the same root. What do you do when are you reading the Quran or are you reciting the Quran?
Recited?
Exactly. So the word Iqra doesn't mean read, it means recite. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, Ma ana biqari. Ma means no, I'm not. I am not a reciter. He didn't say I'm not a reader. That wouldn't make any sense. I don't know if the Catholic Church made this up, but somebody made up a false hadith saying, Ana ummi, I'm illiterate. No, he didn't say that. He said, I'm not a reciter. Think about that for a minute. So this is why it's important for us to share information. Now, you woke us up to a lot of stuff today. You did. And you did a good job. Congratulations on that, Zayd. And before you take my job completely away, I'm going to ask you to go sit back down. Alhamdulillah. 10 years old, memorized the whole entire Quran. I'm still working on Juz Amma. Bits and pieces out of the Quran, but against this guy, give him a couple more years, we'll be calling him Sheikh Zayd. MashaAllah. Thank you so much for your participation. You really did a good job. Our youth, our youngsters today are very, very special because not only they are special to us, they're going to be very special to the rest of the world. And why? Because the world is rapidly changing. Things that I saw back in the 1940s, when I first started going to school, I saw things that I was marveled at. Like, oh, this is so, interesting. I'm going to give you an example. We went to church, but we were Christian. We went to church every Sunday. We never missed a Sunday. And we lived in Ohio, so the snow would be piled up. No, you're going to dig out. You got to get to church. Even if you don't go to your job, you got to go to church. And I remember riding in a trolley car that had a stove in it to keep it warm. It had a fire going in the stove. Could you imagine? I think some of the cities would have a problem with that today. Anyway, so we were riding in this, and church, and all the women were wearing black, wearing scarves on their heads, because the Bible talks about that. When you go into the church, the women have to be covered, or else shave their head. That's what it says in the Bible. These women took it serious. They would cover up, long dresses all the way down to their ankles, black. And I remember it. The trolley car filling up, and then my mother said, oh. Now, my mother was born in 1910. She said, when I was a girl, nobody would come in to, public like this girl. And I had no idea what she was talking about. She was wearing all black, she was wearing a scarf, Later, my mother told me, as I grew up, I asked her about that. She said she was PG. You know what? In those days, you couldn't say the word pregnant. Can you imagine? PG. The girl was showing a little bit of her natural thing. Imagine. What is it today? Oh, and I saw a video, or a film actually, in 1940s, of my mother swimming in Lake Erie. Her brother, he was grown at the time, he had the camera and was filming her swimming. She was wearing a bathing suit. Oh, it came down to her wrist, and it came down to her ankles, and she had a cap on, and she was very shy about it. She was saying, turn the camera off, I'm wearing a bathing suit. Can you imagine? Now what is it today? Take it for granted, and for the benefit of the youth here, I don't want to say, but I think they already know what it's like on the beach today. And we say, Alhamdulillah. I guess we could say back in my day, it's the same way. But the reason I'm telling you the story is to indicate how rapidly things are changing right now. Things that were 10 years ago, unheard of, happening today. Things even 5 years ago happening today that we would have, as Americans, we would not have tolerated it. But we have to accept it today. Why? Because that's what's prevalent. What are you going to do? How are you going to deal with it? And that's why it's so important for other communities to pick up on what you guys are doing right now. To have a breakfast or a lunch or anything, gathering together on the weekends to bring us all back to square one and worship Allah alone without any partners. As Zayd was reminding us, that's exactly why we were created, and that's what we're supposed to do. Now let's get back to the subject. Why do good things happen to bad people, but bad things are happening to good people? Well, they had already nailed that one, because this life is a test. Bad people getting good things, they don't realize that all of this is coming from Allah. Why don't they say, thank you, Allah? They just want more and more and more and more, until Shaitan tells them, there's no God. Don't worry about that. You're going to live forever. Shaitan does that. It gets convicted. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to break off again and tell you something else that happened. Back in the 60s, 1960s, I was riding in a taxi with a man. He was about 65 years old, something like that. And he was telling me that he's going to live forever. And I said, yeah, right.